The possibility of a Chinese attack on Taiwan has been a long-standing concern in international relations. This essay delves into the multifaceted implications such an event would have on the global stage, encompassing political, economic, security, and humanitarian dimensions. Understanding the potential ramifications is crucial for comprehending the complexities of this geopolitical scenario. For China, Taiwan is not merely a significant political issue. It represents an opportunity for the United States to impede or potentially halt China's ascent. A conflict over Taiwan has the potential to escalate into a much larger war, with unprecedented consequences due to the interconnectedness of the globalized economy. The impact of such a war would surpass anything witnessed in history, making the Russian attack on Ukraine appear limited in comparison. The repercussions could extend to a war between the United States and China, fundamentally reshaping the political and economic landscape of the world. This video will explore the palpable possibility of a new Cold War. It is worth noting that a potential war between the United States and China may not necessarily involve Taiwan. However, the likelihood of such a conflict remains slim. Larger wars typically require triggers, and Chinese missile strikes on Taiwan could serve as one such catalyst. Despite decades of relative peace and cooperation, the situation surrounding Taiwan is deteriorating. Unlike in the 1980s, the United States no longer requires China's assistance in countering the Soviet Union threat. China has since transformed into an industrial and technological powerhouse, rendering the United States' previous stance of recognizing only one China, the communist regime, less relevant. Despite the historical stance of the United States recognizing only one China, specifically the communist regime, this position is currently undergoing a transformation. The trade war initiated by Donald Trump with China has opened the floodgates, leading to a broader conflict that resembles a new Cold War. While not a conventional military conflict, it is characterized by various actions taken by multiple U.S. administrations to impede the flow of technology into China and form alliances and partnerships aimed at containing its influence. For decades, Taiwan has only been recognized by a few small and insignificant countries. While Taiwan has not pursued formal independence, this may change in the future. Over time, an increasing number of Taiwanese citizens have distanced themselves from their Chinese identity. Consequently, it is not inconceivable that a future Taiwanese government may seek to alter the status quo and establish Taiwan as an independent nation. Although most people in Taiwan do not believe that war is imminent, the diminishing identification with Chinese culture and values suggests that a shift in the political landscape may occur. Consequently, it is possible that Taiwan may eventually have a government in power that actively pursues formal independence for the benefit of its people. In the past, the idea of such a move would have been inconceivable, as the United States considered China to be the more significant partner. However, in recent years, there has been a shift in the stance of the United States. Today, there is a growing concern that China could potentially become a more powerful nation, thereby altering the current global order. While there have been various agreements signed between Taiwan and the United States, none of them explicitly state that the United States will engage in military action to defend Taiwan. The furthest the United States has gone thus far is to express its willingness to assist Taiwan in its self-defense efforts by providing weapons. However, this ambiguous position of the United States may change. In recent years, there has been an increasing number of U.S. officials advocating for a formal commitment to defend Taiwan. While this may serve as a deterrent to China, it also raises the possibility of a conflict. For instance, such a move may embolden Taiwan to declare formal independence, which China has publicly stated is a red line. If China were to militarily engage Taiwan, even limited military operations could rapidly escalate into a full-scale war between China and the United States, or even between China and the United States, engaging in more frequent military exercises near Taiwan. Both sides have already increased the frequency and scope of such exercises. In the event of an accidental loss of lives of soldiers under unclear circumstances, tensions could reach a point where trigger-happy, unstable, or feared troops on either side might open fire. Alternatively, the political gamesmanship could become so intense that the United States may deploy troops to Taiwan either as a precautionary measure or as a provocation. If China perceives that it cannot permit further deployment of U.S. troops in Taiwan, as it may complicate its plans to exert control over Taiwan. Certain factions within the Chinese government may consider a preemptive attack as a preferable course of action rather than waiting for additional U.S. troops to arrive. The manner in which the war commences could have significant implications, influencing various factors and subsequent consequences. For instance, if China were to launch an unprovoked attack on Taiwan, it is highly likely that the international community would condemn such aggression, with numerous countries labeling it as a hostile act. While not all nations may be capable of ceasing trade with China, this event would be of such magnitude that a substantial coalition of countries would unite in imposing sanctions on China. Additionally, many countries might even offer military assistance against China. In the event that China attacks Taiwan following a declaration of official independence by Taiwan, a smaller number of countries may unite in imposing sanctions and refraining from trade with China. However, such specific details could influence countries that would otherwise remain neutral to de facto neutrality, even if they publicly condemn a Chinese military offensive. If, for example, U.S. troop numbers in Taiwan were significantly increased and the U.S. was perceived as facilitating a change in Taiwan's independent status, even fewer countries might openly support a coalition against China in terms of trade. Similarly, if the U.S. unilaterally recognizes Taiwan as an independent nation, it is impossible to predict how countries would react and under what conditions. Nevertheless, even if all the aforementioned scenarios were to occur, the fact that China initiated military force would likely be sufficient for countries typically aligned with the U.S. to form an alliance against trading with China. This would likely include the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan, and possibly numerous European countries as well. Although there is no guarantee of unanimous agreement within the European Union, it is unlikely that countries in close proximity to China would join a military alliance. Some may even choose to maintain trade relations with China, particularly if their economies are heavily dependent on it. South Korea serves as an example, as it has significant military cooperation with the United States, but stands to lose more by taking sides rather than remaining neutral. Additionally, the proximity of China's land forces poses a significant challenge for these countries. While a considerable portion of China's Navy and Air Forces would be engaged in military operations against the United States and Taiwan, a substantial number of Chinese land forces would remain available to intervene in other conflicts. Therefore, the advantages and disadvantages of aligning with a particular side may not be logical for countries like South Korea and the Philippines. Russia may also choose to remain neutral, as China may request or discourage its involvement in conflicts elsewhere, such as Ukraine. The European Union would likely view any Russian assistance to China as an indication of a military alliance, potentially resulting in China losing access to the European market, which would be highly detrimental. The geographical barrier of the Himalayas and the risk of Pakistan, a Chinese ally, becoming involved in the conflict would likely dissuade India from using military force, opting instead for sanctions. In fact, only a handful of countries, namely the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Japan, would potentially provide military assistance to Taiwan. Among these, Japan's support would be particularly crucial. If, for any reason, Japan does not facilitate the coalition war efforts led by the United States, it would have a significant impact. The United States would opt not to engage in military conflict with China, and consequently, the coalition would follow suit. Japan's strategic location is of utmost significance, as it would enable the coalition to utilize its territory as a base to project power against China, thereby rendering the war a potentially winnable endeavor for the United States and the coalition. If Japanese territory is not available for use, the likelihood of Taiwan remaining independent becomes exceedingly slim. Among the neighboring countries to China, Japan is the most robust, geographically distant, and aligned with the United States, making it the most suitable candidate to provide such bases. Conversely, the Philippines would be politically unlikely to offer their territory to the coalition and infrastructurally deficient to make such an effort worthwhile. However, Japan's abstention from the war would be nearly impossible, given that the current government is actively encouraging the United States to openly pledge to defend Taiwan, and the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty stipulates that the two nations would defend each other if either is attacked in territories under Japanese administration. Even if Japan's government and its people were to resist the treaty, the harsh reality is that the U.S. military and the Japanese military are too intertwined for Japan to evict U.S. troops by force. Therefore, the United States would attack Chinese forces using bases on Japanese soil, and China would retaliate by targeting those bases. In the event of an attack, Japanese troops and civilians would inevitably suffer casualties, potentially leading to a decline in support for neutrality. The war would not be a swift one, as it would not solely concern Taiwan, but rather the global power dynamic. Taiwan itself may change hands multiple times, with both China and any coalition assembled by the U.S. committing all available resources to the conflict. However, the two sides would have differing objectives. China's best-case scenario would be to secure and maintain control over Taiwan and potentially some of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, such as Okinawa. Other territorial gains would be unlikely, and the U.S. may use the Ryukyu Islands as leverage to force Japan out of the war. Ultimately, China's primary goal would be to demonstrate its military strength to the world rather than territorial expansion. If the coalition's military proves unable to defeat China, China would declare victory. However, if the U.S. inflicts significant damage on China's military, China would be unable to maintain control over Taiwan, and any forces landed on the island would eventually surrender under U.S. attacks in Taiwanese insurgency. If China launches an attack on Taiwan but fails to hold it, this would constitute a clear victory for the U.S., with the Chinese Navy and Air Forces nearly destroyed, while the bulk of the Chinese Army may still be operational. It would have minimal impact on the overall balance of power in the future. However, there exists an alternative chain of events. Even if China were to hold Taiwan and the U.S. were to cease its attacks, in the long run, spanning several decades, China may either emerge victorious or suffer defeat, contingent upon the long-term effects on the economy. This is a complex course of events that extends far into the future. In the immediate future, the global economy would experience a downturn on a scale comparable to that of World War II. Unless China manages to retain a significant number of countries, including EU member states, on its side, it would suffer greater trade losses than the U.S., at least until the political fallout subsides. Certain products that are crucial for today's economy, such as electronics, would be severely impacted. Taiwan dominates the global production of computer chips, and most other producers are located in close proximity to the battlefield, resulting in a significant impact on the Western world's supply of electronics and a corresponding increase in prices. China may potentially experience a relatively better situation in terms of semiconductor shortages compared to the United States. This is because China has a significant presence in the production chain for semiconductors within its own borders. In contrast, American companies dominate a large portion of the semiconductor market, but face challenges in accessing semiconductor factories due to the ongoing conflict. This situation applies to many other products as well, as China has emerged as the world's leading manufacturing hub over the years. Various complex tools, machines, cars, and electronics are predominantly manufactured and assembled in China, with raw materials sourced from around the globe. Consequently, the lack of access to these raw materials would have a severe impact on China's economy. Notably, China's reliance on imported oil and gas is particularly vulnerable, with tanker ships unable to reach Chinese ports. While China meets slightly over half of its natural gas needs domestically, approximately one-third of imported gas is transported through Asian pipelines. Therefore, close to 30% of China's current gas requirements may not be fulfilled as long as the United States continues to disrupt these shipping lanes. The situation is even more dire for crude oil, as China heavily relies on imports, with approximately 83% arriving by ships that are susceptible to blockades. Consequently, there is a possibility that 60% of China's oil needs may be unable to reach the country. It is important to note that the needs during times of war differ from those during peacetime. While war production may increase in both the United States and China, it pales in comparison to the production of commercial goods, which would suffer a significant blow during a conflict. In effect, China may require fewer oil, gas, and other raw materials until it successfully discovers new markets for its products. However, even if it manages to find sufficient new markets, its economy would undoubtedly be hindered by significantly higher oil prices within China. On the other hand, total energy requirements would likely be increased by other energy sources. In comparison to coal, all other energy sources utilized in China appear inferior. China is a significant coal producer, covering 93% of its current needs. Interestingly, if an oil blockade were to be imposed against China, there would be an oversupply of oil in the West, resulting in price drops after the initial increase as the war commences. Therefore, during the hot war itself, neither side would genuinely lack the raw materials to either wage war or produce weapons and ammunition at their maximum efficiency, certainly not for a few years to come. However, overall, economies being much larger and more demanding would feel the sting of insufficient raw materials and inadequate market access, while the U.S.'s problems would be those of redistributing their supply networks and market access. China's problems would include those, and also involve finding additional markets to effectively utilize their industrial potential. Taiwan itself would be utterly devastated by war. If Taiwan's morale proves to be high, the Chinese invasion attempt might be slowed down. A month or a year may pass, mass bombardments may occur, and literally millions might die. Much of the world might unite against China in the face of such suffering. Whoever ultimately controls Taiwan would control a collection of urban rubble and a starving population. Its once industrial and technological edge would essentially be lost. Neither China nor the U.S. would find it in their interest to rebuild Taiwan to the technological level it enjoys today. Japan would experience some destruction, but it would be relatively limited to military sites and some ports, nothing that cannot be rebuilt fairly quickly. When considering the potential destruction within China, it is contingent upon the type of coalition the United States may form and the access this coalition would have. It is possible that China would only experience sporadic strikes on its military and industrial targets if the coalition proves to be insufficient in overcoming Chinese defenses. Alternatively, if the Chinese defenses were to eventually weaken, the Chinese coastline may suffer significant damage to its industries and ports. However, it is important to note that even with these scenarios, we are still discussing only a small percentage of Chinese industry, given the vastness of the country and the multitude of targets. The United States itself is unlikely to experience significant destruction or loss of life, except for a select few military targets that China may reach. There is a possibility of sporadic missile attacks on Hawaii, Alaska, and even the west coast of the United States, but these would primarily serve as symbolic raids. Undoubtedly, the U.S. economy would be severely impacted by such a significant shift in the global economy. However, the network of countries that the U.S. continues to trade with would likely be larger than China's, reducing the U.S.'s vulnerability to shortages of raw materials. It is important to acknowledge that all parties involved would experience losses compared to the present situation. In the short term, China would likely suffer greater economic losses, while the long-term consequences are difficult to predict. One thing is certain. China's immense size, population, and growing economy mean that the current circumstances will not remain the same in the future. If a war were to occur today, many of the aforementioned predictions may come to fruition. However, if the conflict were to arise in 5 or 10 years, China may be better equipped to sustain itself after such a war. This uncertainty is why humanity has not yet been confronted with such a war. Ultimately, the outcome depends on the decisions made by Chinese leadership. They may prioritize the importance of Taiwan over China's medium-term economic future, or they may determine that the economic rise of China is not worth the costs associated with a war over Taiwan. The decisions made by the United States also play a significant role in the potential decoupling of China from the West, regardless of Taiwan. In such a scenario, the likelihood of a war in Taiwan and even a global conflict may increase, even if the United States does not directly participate in the conflict. For instance, if Taiwan chooses not to resist and China successfully invades in a swift manner, this event alone could alter the global political order, leading to the formation of country blocs. The new Cold War, which has only just begun, would rapidly intensify, and humanity would be thrown back to the late 1940s. A new Iron Curtain would emerge, and prices around the world would skyrocket due to the breakdown of globalization. People would once again live in fear of a nuclear Armageddon. Regarding the conflict of nations game, it is worth noting that real people control the opposing countries in the game, and up to 128 players can participate in real-time strategy gameplay. The game is methodical, with orders issued leading to battles that may take place hours later. Much like in the real world, games can take weeks to complete, and over 100 different modern weapon systems are modeled in-game, including ballistic missile subs, attack helicopters, and stealth jets. The military research tree is extensive, with over 250 items available for research. It is up to the player to choose their strategy, including troop deployment, diplomacy, and preparation for epic battles to take over the world. The new Conflict of Nations game offers an immersive and engaging experience for players seeking a challenging and strategic gameplay experience. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new videos. Just click the subscribe button below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means a lot to us, and it helps us continue creating content you love. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next video.